Anyway, it's beautiful. If you oh, it's telling me that I can't rotate. There we go. Got lots of apples. We'll have to thin these out. Otherwise, they just won't do good. They won't grow and big. So, and if they grow together, they'll start to hit each other when they get big. So there's lots of work, but we're going to be blessed this year with tons of apples. Anyway, I've got good water here. We sprinkle, and so I've got to change these every day. My two youngest, Emery and Elias, helped me, and they did the upper water, so they're up there helping. Anyway, I wanted to give you an update on what's happening. It's actually been quite peaceful here. We've got a huge stack of mail, and it's interesting because the people at the post office are pretty sick of hauling it hard too. In fact, I thought about just rejecting and making it, everything that comes from them, just returning it to them. I think this last stack is over a foot high. And of course the mail lady has to bring it, or UPS or FedEx or somebody. Haven't had any services done since the sheriff came that clear when, this started to be a little more public. You've probably seen the video, or at least there's a video out there. So that's been nice. They haven't come onto my property, or to my home now, I guess, is what I have to call it. And so that's been good. But we're still getting stacks of mail, and the mail people, I thought about, like I said, tell them to send it back, but I don't want to give them more work. I don't know if it's more work for them to deliver it or just to send it back. Costs them more to send it back, but trying to be fair to them. But besides that, it's been real peaceful here. Just been taking care of these trees, my property, and working in the shop, got jobs there. And I feel blessed by the Lord, and haven't had any trouble with the sheriff or his deputies. They've just stayed away from here, and as far as I know. And I think that that's because of the people have responded pretty strongly and said this is not right. And otherwise, what would keep them from just coming up here and doing their thing? Very, very sure about what I did. I stood for a family, a little baby, and I did what was right. And I don't think it's really hard to figure out here who's right and who's wrong. And an interesting thing, I sent a letter a month or so ago to Eric Steidham, who's the lead attorney for St. Luke's, who's heading this whole lawsuit. And for those that maybe are just catching up, St. Luke's is suing me and Diego Rodriguez, who's baby Cyrus's grandfather, for $7.5 million. It started out at $300,000, and now it's gone all the way up to $7.5 million. And they're trying to take everything that we own and destroy us, trying to destroy people's rights, the communication network that we built, and they're trying to crush the ability for people to speak out against, institutions and the government when they take babies or whatever else. And I'm not okay with that. I don't think the majority of the country is okay with that. There might be some really wicked people out there, there are a lot of them, that are okay with the state taking babies from loving and caring parents, but I'm not okay with that. There's this mentality out there that that the state owns everything, that the state owns the resources. And I'm talking about, when I say state, the government, on whatever level, that the government owns the resources, the government owns the land, that the government owns us, which we saw during COVID and the things that they did during that, and then also that the state owns our children and everything else, and that we're basically wards of the state or subjects to the state, to the government. And they believe that. And they believe that these are our judges and our lawyers that are mostly teaching this and pushing this. And this is what's been happening in our country, where, you know, the sovereignty of a person being a child of God and being able to have a right to live on this earth, and to have a piece of this earth, and to be able to use the resources, the natural resources, to invent and create and to survive and to feed themselves. And that includes water, that includes land, that includes minerals. You know, everything comes from the earth. And the government is saying that government agents, because the government is just people, that our governments, mostly the agencies, have been filled with people that don't believe that. They believe that, you know, that it has to be controlled, and that it can't be freely used, and then it's in conjunction with corporations such as St. Luke's, you know, and utility companies and banks and so forth, that try to use the people to make every, you know, dollar they can off them, whether it comes to utilities or whether it comes to, you know, food, travel, all of that. And so we're under this, you know, unholy alliance between government officials and large institutions and corporations that are, you know, basically taking almost any extra wealth that people have. And what are they doing with that wealth? Well, they're building their bureaucracies or their corporations, and they're becoming extremely wealthy. And those that are in the agencies or in the corporations are doing quite well by basically, you know, extracting the wealth from the common man. This isn't something new. This is something that has happened, you know, over and over again. And a good example is with baby Cyrus. I mean, we know now, even though Diego's been asking for the discovery from St. Luke's, meaning like, how much money did you make off baby Cyrus? How much money did you get from federal government? How much did you get from the state? You know, what did you do to him while you had him? And all these things that Diego has asked for from St. Luke's, and St. Luke's has refused to produce that evidence, even though the law is very clear, because they're always finding excuses or using some legal maneuvering to not allow that to happen. And so that's been very difficult to get that information. But we do know that that St. Luke's at least received a little over $30,000 from one government agency, and so we at least know that. And so they only had him, I think, for 4 days or so, 4 or 5 days in their actual care. And that's what's happening. So the government takes a baby from loving and caring parents who are, you know, concerned. They put him in a hospital. They, in my opinion, and I think there's plenty of evidence, they just about killed him. And if they would have held on to him longer, I believe they would have killed him. And but then they made a bunch of money off him. He becomes like their little credit card machine, where they could just keep swiping and keep swiping and keep swiping and making money off of him. And you know, and that's what they do. And then we also know that the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare, CPS, also made around another 40 grand. This is just coming from the federal government, because they took baby Cyrus. And so there's this collusion, this unholy alliance, where they're highly motivated to, you know, take our rights, including our children, to make money. And we see it in our utilities, like our power. Power shouldn't be that expensive, especially in Idaho. We have more hydro dams than almost any other state, maybe any other state. You know, we've got everything going for us, and yet every turn, because of this unholy alliance between the utility companies and the government, we way overpay for power. Every person does. And what's that going to? That's going to regulation, to government entities, the money, and to these corporations. And they're building up these, large employment base that all getting pensions and all getting high wages, and most of it's not needed. And then on top of that, they're ignoring the infrastructure, so that at some point we're going to have this massive debt that we're going to have to, incur, because they're not keeping up with the infrastructure. And so it's actually threatening our utilities at the same hand, or our ability to have power at the same hand. They're charging way too much, and that might seem like a contradiction, but it's not, because when you put all your money into employment or into pensions where you don't get that back in utilities, in power, then that doesn't work on the end. There's a problem, and you don't maintain your infrastructure. And so that's an issue. The federal government's part of that problem too, because of the Bureau of Reclamations have tried to control all our dams and so forth. That's another topic. Anyway, I offer this to you because these are just some of the challenges that we face as a people. And this St. Luke's lawsuit is a perfect example. It's not, even though it's specific for what's happening to us, Diego and I, and Levi and Marissa, Cyrus's parents, and so forth, and a few others that are that have been involved. But this same type of thing is literally happening to all of us across this country, because government isn't in it for the people anymore. Government is in it for themselves. So they become a law unto themselves. They've kind of power unto themselves. And it's the same with these corporations. And you can't tell anymore where the corporations begin and the government ends, or where the government ends and the corporations begin. Because there's this, like I said, this collusion and this unholy alliance. So that's what's been happening. Interesting enough, that I mentioned this letter that I sent to Eric Stidham, the head attorney. And in that letter, because he kept saying, that I was lying. And so, of course, I believe I have not lied about anything. I know I haven't. I knew the facts. I know the facts. And they've only become more clear. And what I said clear back then appears to be exactly right. And and so he said that I've lied. So I wrote him this letter, and I reference it I actually had links when I said, things like that the police lied to Marissa. We'll have a link there. When I said that St. Luke's broke their own protocols, I put a link there. When I said that St. Luke's and the CPS was not planning on giving baby Cyrus medical care by taking him to the hospital that night, that they were planning on giving him to foster parents. Well, I give him a link, a video. These things are all in the evidence. And I got this evidence not from this case. I got it from when they criminally trespassed me. I don't know if you remember that. Well, I got the evidence from that, and it shows the videos of the cops and the doctors and all of them colluding. Things like when the doctor puts in the notes, the medical notes, that the baby's parents are friends with Ammon Bundy, who's running for governor. What does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with anything? But yeah, it's in the medical notes. The doctor actually said that. This is the doctor, Natasha Erickson, who actually first contacted CPS and started this whole mess, which is another thing that I've said. They've tried to say I lied about Dr. Erickson contacting CPS and starting this mess, but it's in the evidence. And so I presented that to them. And now he actually changed his terminology. He's not saying I'm a liar now. which is very interesting. Now he's saying that I don't understand what really happened, or the truth that I there's a term that he's using in the depositions that I'm misrepresenting, not misrepresenting, because that's basically a lie, that I'm not understanding, that I don't understand the facts. I think that's what he's saying, that I'm not understanding the facts. But the facts are there, and I was involved from the beginning. I was involved with the family long before Eric Steidham ever got involved or was retained. So, I mean, understanding the facts is pretty clear, especially when you see it in the evidence and in video. But at least he's changed his terminology a little bit. Now he's just saying, I don't understand the facts. And I think what he's hoping to do is present what his version of the facts are, and to the jury what he thinks the facts are, because that's what they do. They connect facts incorrectly together to create a different narrative. That's what attorneys do in court. Try to convince a jury. And most of the time they could do it because, the people are like awestruck about attorneys and judges and the law, and they think that somehow there's no way that they could ever make a mistake. Yet there's some of the most wicked, perverted, corrupt people you'll ever meet. And people just don't know it until they've been in the system and been abused by the system. And then it becomes very clear that every one of them that I have met, except just a very, very few, are completely driven by money and gain, and they're all liars. And I say exception of a very, very few. And those people don't last very long in the system. They're actually crushed and driven out. And I've seen that personally myself. When you have an attorney who truly defends you, well, he's attacked and destroyed by the system and doesn't last very long in there. So anyway, back to Eric Steidham. The evidence is there of what happened. There shouldn't be any, it's not really that big a question. But they're going to try to create a different narrative and say that, I didn't understand the facts. And on top of that, Diego just received a motion from St. Luke's asking the court, it's called a motion of limine, asking the court not to allow Diego to present certain evidence in front of the jury. They're actually, and this is a very common thing, it's a motion of limine. So they're asking the court to not allow Diego to present the evidence, most of the evidence that he has in trial. And and this is an effort to make the jury believe something different than the truth. And you say, well, you had your fair day in trial, but that's not what happens when you go to trial. You don't get your fair day in court. The judge and the lawyers, most of the time the prosecutors in this case, they actually stop the jury from seeing the truth. And in fact, if you've ever been in a court, it's crazy, it's amazing. It's like a big production, because the judge, anytime there's any type of real debate or real discussion, the judge will stop the process and ask the jury to leave. And then, because everything is worked out, it's just a production. It's just like a Broadway show where everything's worked out. And if there's anything that doesn't work out, we got to dismiss the audience so that they don't think that they don't actually get the truth. The judge has to make sure that, that it's a production. And all the way down to even people's clothing. My very first trial in Oregon, right before trial, they give us our street clothes, our clothes or whatever that we can wear during trial, which we haven't been able to wear at that point for 9 months to 10 months, almost 10 months. And the judge, we got dressed up, and she had the marshal line us all up in the front of the courtroom. And the judge got down off the bench. There's no one in there except the marshals, us, our attorneys, and the judge. And she comes down off the bench, lowers herself down to us, and she literally looks over and leans down, looks at us, and she goes, "Yeah, you look like you could be not guilty." And it was so demeaning. And at that point, I refused to wear those clothes. I was just gonna wear my prison clothes, and I did. Every trial I went through, I wore my prison clothes. Every trial when I was incarcerated, of course, I went through my prison clothes because I was not gonna allow the judge to make this look like something that it really wasn't. But that was their whole desire, and their whole effort was to basically make this look to the jury like justice was happening and like it was all legitimate. And it was just a fraud. The jury doesn't get to hear the truth. The jury only gets to hear what the judge authorizes, and the judge is a lawyer, and many of them were prosecutors, and they're being paid by the government. So if it's a political prosecution, they only get to hear basically what the government wants them to hear. And that's the issue. Oh, darn it.
I found it.
We had a huge wind blow. It's kind of sad, but I guess I can show you guys.
I found them.
Shh. We had a huge wind blow, and that blew the nest out of the tree.
No, Dad.
Anyway, so this is the way it goes. And now this is happening just in this trial. And it's just what happens. These people, our justice system is corrupt. It's not about truth. It's not about justice. And if you're in a conservative state with quote unquote conservative judges, which I don't believe that's an oxymoron really, but I'm just talking about politically, if they try to claim conservative, then you can't get mercy. You can't get mercy in the courts either. And so there is no justice and there is no mercy. In some courts where they're liberal, they'll give you mercy, which is bad for justice. And but in most of the courts, you don't get mercy or justice. And so that's where we're at. But I will say, above all, I feel very protected. I feel that the Lord is watched over our family. I feel safe at my home. I'm free. We'll take care of him then. Okay, take care of him. Keep him warm. See if you can save his life. Little bird that was in a nest. And so that's where we're at. It's not a system of justice. It's not a system of truth. And that's why I refuse to participate in it. That's why I'm not going to go in to the courts and legitimize this process. This judge, if justice was to be met, should have stopped the process a long time ago. Even legally, even through the law, even through the civil process, they should have stopped it. So I want to show you one other thing. I have these big trees that surround the east part of my house, and I've lived here eight years now, and these trees have been here probably, they probably were planted 25-30 years ago. I don't know when they were planted exactly, but yesterday we had a big microburst, and in just a couple seconds it knocked down this big old tree, uprooted it, and just tore it right out of the ground. I mean, this is a big tree. It's probably 40 feet tall, 30 to 40 feet tall, and it took it out like nothing. Just ripped it right out of the ground, and I'm kind of mourning over it because it takes 30 years to grow a tree like that. And I believe this is a symbol and of what I mean by that. I mean, don't go too deep into this, but I believe this is what's going to happen to our country. And I looked at, what happened here? Well, the interesting thing is I got to take a little bit of fault for this. Although I didn't cause the wind, but I actually stopped watering up here really heavily. It gets a little bit, but I stopped watering up here last year because of basically some irrigation changes that I made. And I think those roots weren't deep and healthy and deep like they used to. And maybe it was just the tree or just the wind, I don't know. But the analogy that I'm trying to make here is that, you know, it takes 30 years to grow a tree like that, 25, 30 years to grow a tree like that, and it gets knocked down in a second. And we have taken, you know, 230 plus years to grow this country, and the Lord can take it out in just a few seconds if he wants to. And I believe he will if we don't change what's happening, especially in our justice system. Because if you don't have justice, if you can't get justice, if there's not justice that's basically, you know, brought, then what do you have a nation for? And what is a nation, what good is it? You know, and the wickedness of our judges and our lawyers in this country are destroying us, completely destroying us. Because it doesn't matter. Like, you know, you're talking about your families, your children. If you can't feel and know that they're secure and safe, and that you can go to a power like the government to help secure and keep them safe, then what do we have a government for? If you can't protect your property, if you can't access food and grow food or raise your children the way you want to, or travel or to worship, and if that can't be protected, then what good is your government? Because that was the purpose of government. But now we have these political people that are judges and lawyers that have come in and completely corrupted our laws, corrupted our system, and there is no justice. The only people who ever get anything out of the system are those that are politically aligned with the judges and the lawyers. And they're wicked people, and they do it for gain. Think about the irony. Eric Stidham, the head attorney of St. Luke's, along with Chris Roth, who's the CEO, called me in one of their motions, I think he's done it a couple times, called me a, what was the term? A conflict entrepreneur. And this is and a grifter. Well, think about it. He literally makes his money going around off of conflict, making money and opportunity off of conflict. That's what he does. That's who he is as a lawyer. He goes and finds conflicts and then makes money. And he's built an entire firm and an entire livelihood and career off of the opportunity he gets from conflict. And yet he calls me a conflict entrepreneur, when I just want to stay home and, you know, and take care of my family. And the only reason why I even go out and help people is because the government has come down upon them, or a large institution, and they need my voice. And I believe where much is given, much is expected, and I can't just be silent. So anyway, hopefully I've said some things here that make sense. I mostly want to just give you an update and let you know that we're doing good, that the Lord is blessing us, and that I believe he's going to protect us, and that we're going to prevail. I've seen this happen before in my life, and I believe it'll happen again. It's kind of difficult as we go through it, and it's not easy, but my family's doing well, and we're blessed here, and I believe that the Lord will work this all out as he has in the past. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.